Could we please welcome laser legend, SailGP legend and 3 times World Sailor of the Year, Tom Slingsby.
Yeah, I was just talking to Tom about early days. I sailed at the same club as Tom, back in the 90s, I suppose, 80s, 90s mainly.
Yep.
Yeah, so I remember Tom as a little kid, more of a tennis player than a sailor back in those days. And we went for a sail together, didn't we?
Yeah, the first time I met Martin, he took me for a sail on his 505, and the 505 fleet used to have take the youth sailors out each time. So I would have been probably 8 or 10 years old, and Martin took me out in the 505 and took me for a blast, and he was just asking, did he swear at me? And I said, probably. I was a pretty bad young sailor, so high chance.
Well, what you did say to me, Tom, is, "That's so fast."
Yeah, I did.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you want to say now?
Yeah. So most of us know Tom's achievements, but he's 3 times World Sailor of the Year. It's incredible, really. Has won 5 laser World Championships, Olympic gold medalist. You've won the America's Cup. I think you've competed in the America's Cup 3 times now.
Yep.
2 times Moth World Champion. Nearly won it last year. Probably with limited practice time. Finished 2nd. And Sydney to Hobart winner. It's a bit different.
Yeah.
I think you've only done 1 Hobart, have you? Or more?
No, I think I did 5 or 6.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Yep. So yeah, whatever, it's a formidable sailing CV, that's for sure. Last time we covered the early days of your sailing, and people do remember some of the gems, like 6.5 years later. People quote you sometimes. Things like, as we're going out, they'll say to me, 1 foot per wave, 1 foot per wave, things like that. Meaning that's your mindset you develop with time. Mm-hmm. Also things like, last time we talked about how you perfected the low mode. We talked about that. Not as easy as you might think, but there was a lot of trial and error in that. And I think you talked about sailing against Brendan Casey up at RQ in the chop there. Mm-hmm. You talked about when to use it and when not to use it. Anyway, there are so many gems that if you want to look at that video, it's still available on Vimeo. There's no password, I don't think, Kirk, but anyway, it's what people are welcome to look at it. You also talked about Garda. I was saying to Tom earlier that a bunch of us went to Garda recently and had a great time. Unlike you, we didn't go on to win anything, but we had a great time. And your win subsequent to Garda would have been back in 2012, where you had that emphatic victory in London. Yep. What else did you talk about? The actual worlds. That was a funny moment. You crewed for John Bertrand. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm going to say?
No, I don't.
Well, I think they came down to the bottom mark, and Tom's crewing for John, and not really respecting that John Bertrand at the time was about 70 years of age. At a critical point, that bottom turning mark, Bertrand slipped over and he's down the bottom of the boat, and Tom picked him up and said, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah, I think you got to do fucking better than that, mate. And then I was quite fired up, and then about a couple of seconds later, I look around and our forward hand looks over behind me at John as I was hiking, and I saw him lock eyes, and I saw John just had the biggest grin on his face, and he just sort of hit me in the arm. He's going, "That's what I like to see, buddy."
Bit of fire in the belly.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about a lot of things tonight. We're going to have to move through it pretty quickly because we've got SailGP to talk about, we've got the America's Cup, we've got Moth sailing, and TP52s, which you've done a bit of sailing on, and also a bit of technique kind of stuff that everyone will be interested in. We'll actually start with the America's Cup. As I said before, you've been to 3 cups. That's like the university of sailing, really, because you're locked into meetings, long days, I'd imagine, long days on the water, long days in meetings. Last time we talked about Bermuda, we talked about when you sailed on Oracle in San Francisco and won the Cup in 2013, I think. But we'll talk mainly about this most recent Cup in 2024 in Barcelona. So there would have been a lot of learnings there. Tell us about the design of that boat, the American Magic, or Patriot, they often called it, I think. It was a little bit different to a lot of the other boats, which made it hard for you in some ways. Yeah, let's go through that. And I think there was a review afterwards, wasn't there? So maybe you can talk about some of those learnings as well.
Yeah, so I joined American Magic, did the 2021 Cup, which I sat out to join SailGP, and they didn't have a great campaign. Everyone knows about the capsize, but I mean, what I think most people remember them for that capsize, but what they might not remember is they actually didn't win a race in that America's Cup, so they were pretty handily beaten in that Cup. And so, I mean, joining the team that came last is often not, it's not your usual move in it, but they were adamant on me joining, and after it was a year of back and forth from when they asked me to join to when I agreed to join, and I joined them, and yeah, they had a really good group of people. I actually really enjoyed it, but the boat we came up with, this was a 2021 boat, also a Patriot. That boat was a really quick boat in the breeze, but basically used to get stuck to the water in the light airs, so it really struggled to take off in the light airs. So with the Cup being in Barcelona, we had a huge focus on light air takeoff. And the boat we actually put on the water probably had the best takeoff of any of the teams, but we didn't actually do that many races where it was really marginal takeoff, because they would just call the racing off if the boats weren't foiling. But the design of that boat, as everyone saw, we had a really low freeboard and a really low deck. And so we actually were about close to 1.5 feet or so lower deck line. And everyone, when the boat came out, we basically had this thing where we found a loophole in the rule, and it had to do with drainage systems through the cockpits and how the water flowed when the boat would be capsized. And one of our really smart designers, his name's Aaron Perry, he found a loophole that basically would change the drainage of how the boat went round. And what that allowed us to do was carry much less volume. There was a minimum volume required for the boat, but there was like to put the Cyclist in and stuff and have the cockpit sizes, you needed quite a lot of volume in the cockpit area, but he figured out this system which allowed us to really minimise the deck height of the boat. And what that allowed us to do was, so if all the boats sort of were this high from the mast ball and came up this much higher, we were sort of down here. And so if I stood up on that boat, basically I was around my hips, whereas the other boats were around their chest, I'd say, their shoulders. And it was really smart, and it allowed us to get a bit of area out of that. You'd be surprised the way we talk about gains is in meters per minute. So with that loophole, it got us 4 meters per minute around the racetrack. So what we do with the design of the boat is you simulate it sailing around the racetrack, and then you've got a baseline, and then you make a design change to the boat like that, where we lowered the cockpit height, and then we can simulate the boat going around the racetrack, and then it came back and it said, okay, you are 4 meters a minute quicker around the racetrack. And that's how we validate all the different things, whether it's a foil, whether it's a sail, whether it's anything, is we speak in meters per minute. But that boat, it is a very quick boat. All in all, I think that boat was quick enough to win the Challenger Series. I think the boat was quick enough. The thing that we really struggled with was control systems. And it's hard to see from an untrained eye, but if you're looking at it, our ride height was not as good, not as consistent as other teams, and that had to do with the control system we were using. And if you look at our foil going through the water, everyone's got their sort of marks, and if you watch our foil, it actually goes up and down a lot more. And the team that actually had the best ride height control was Luna Rossa. And then you looked at them and they had a mark on their foil, and they would just sit on that mark whenever they wanted. And then they'd go through a manoeuvre and they would lower the ride height slightly, and they would sit to the next mark. And they could sit on it so much more accurately than we could, and probably a little bit better than the Kiwis. But basically, I'm controlling all my trimmer. On the wheel, I've got like an F1 wheel, and I can control the traveller. And so I'm controlling the heel of the boat, and we've got a flight controller who's controlling the ride height. But you can imagine we're trying to get the bustle of the boat, the bottom of the boat, just here. The closer we are to the water, the gains go exponentially, because what you're doing is you're sealing the sail plan all the way to the water, and that creates thrust. And so if we can get the boat, like the difference between sort of having the boat this far off the water compared to, say, a foot off the water, is probably in the order of 5-6 meters per minute. So, and you add 5-6 meters per minute, you come off the line, and that could be the difference between crossing and not. So me controlling the heel of the boat, but when you have an unstable ride height, and it had nothing to do with our flight controllers. Our flight controllers were very good, but it had to do with our control system was very difficult. I'm trying to sit the boat, the heel that close, but on the ride height on the foil there, if they drop down accidentally to the next line up, I keep hitting the centre bustle. And so you saw us, we're always sort of touching down more with the bustle, we're touching down more, the foil is going up and down more, and you compare that to the other teams, I think that's why our manoeuvres weren't as good, and our straight line, sometimes we're a rocket and other times we just couldn't get the consistency. And so it was a very hard boat to sail compared to the other teams. And ultimately, I mean, we made mistakes throughout. There were errors here and there, but I think the way we sailed the boat was pretty well, but we just didn't have the manoeuvrability or the stability needed to progress. So we got knocked down the semi-final by the Italians 5-3, and that was it.
So there seemed to be a lot of emphasis on the aero drag, or reducing it. There's a lot of talk about the recumbent cyclists. Mm-hmm. So that is the cyclists leaning back, keeping below deck height. Mm-hmm. I don't know how they could breathe and how they cooled.
That's not a problem. Speed is your friend, and then that's a secondary thought is,
right,
are they able to breathe or not?
Stuff them.
No, but they were unbelievable as well, though. They just said, look, whatever's the fastest thing. I mean, those guys didn't want to be recumbent. They want to be upright, because you can see things, you can put your head out, you can get more airflow, you can all sorts of things. But in the end, they said, look, whatever's the fastest thing, we'll adapt to. And
But were they losing some horsepower because they were recumbent? You know, it's all about wattage. There were reports that they're losing 10 to 20% of wattage compared to other boats.
My understanding is no. So everyone kept saying that we're losing power, and my understanding is we were not. Because after the Cup, we actually got all the data, and that showed how much power all the teams are putting out. And our guys actually were putting out more power than the other teams. People thought that we were losing power because they were showing snapshots of, in a straight line, it would say, oh, this team's doing 1,400 watts and this team's doing 1,200 watts. But they were just real snapshots. But when you averaged it out through the race, it actually, from what the data we got, was our guys were actually putting out slightly higher than all the other teams. When they first started doing tests from an upright cycling position to a recumbent position, they were down 10%, but they started training in a recumbent position over a year before. We had to keep it obviously hidden until the boat came out, but they were training in that position for over a year, and they got their numbers, they beat their old numbers easily and then well up in the future. And then when they did an upright test versus a recumbent test, they were almost identical in the end.
So these guys are not sailors, I believe, or are they?
No, we had 2 sailors on our cycling team. We had a cycling team of 10. So we had a full sailing team, including the cyclists, of 15. So we had 5 actual, like, people who were born and raised into sailing, and then we had 10 guys who didn't know how to sail in our sailing team. So it was a bit of a different dynamic, but they were, the way American Magic did it is they actually sent out, they approached Olympic rowers and people who didn't make the Olympics and said, would you like to join our team? And then they also went to all the top colleges there with all the rowing and swimming programs and cycling programs and said, they put out a flyer. It said, can you do 500 watts for 20 minutes? And a few people were able to do it, and they said, I can actually do that. And then they had to send in a video of them doing 500 watts for 20 minutes, and it had to be calibrated in the right way and proven. And if they did that, then we got them over for a test, and we met them in person and then they had to repeat the test and show that they could do it. And then if they were able to do that, they came on with us. But I think, so we had 2 sailors who tried to convert to the cycling, and they were always a bit lower power, but they had the sailing knowledge, so they knew when to push, like, okay guys, there's a big bear away here, guys, let's push, and they kind of ran the cyclists on board. But most were rowers. I'd say there would have been 6 rowers, maybe 2 cyclists from track cycling, and a swimmer, who, our swimmer was probably one of our best cyclists in the end.
Right, okay. So the big ticket item in design is foils, I'd imagine, because water's a lot denser than air.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the foil selection. Was it done well or not, or were you weak there or strong?
I think, I wouldn't say we were the best, I wouldn't say we were the worst. I would say the Kiwis had the best foils. Our foil, I would have put us in the middle of the range there. I think our foils, the sizing, so the biggest decision was size. So the bigger the size of the foil, it allows you, it's got to do with, we call it thickness to chord ratio. And basically it comes down to a structure thing. If your foil is a certain size, the smaller it is, the thicker it has to be. And the bigger it is, the thinner it can be in span of the foil. But and so you had to sort of choose, the bigger the foil, it sounds counterintuitive, but the larger the area of the foil, the faster the top speed it will have, because it's able to spread the load through the foil much better. If you've got a shorter, thicker foil, it will cavitate much earlier because it's so thick. So you had to basically pick a cavitation speed that you thought that you could operate in, and a lot of the boats, it was around that 45 knots mark downwind, but once you hit cavitation you can go much faster. So we probably did 52 or 53 knots on our foils, but our cavitation number was about 44 knots. But I think we did a pretty good job. I think it was about the right size of foil. When you look at it, it was a little bit bigger than the Kiwi foil and a tiny bit bigger than Ineos, but we're talking tiny amounts, and they went through the water really well. What we talk about with those foils is how they pierce through the water as the tips come out and pierce the surface. Does it ventilate? Does it reattach well? Does it never ventilate? And different things like that. That's got to do with the camber of the foil, the shape of the foil, the thickness of the foil, and how the finishing details of the tips, the foil end tips are. And I think we did a pretty good job in all that. But I don't think anyone did anything revolutionary. I'd say the Kiwis just had a really good, solid package.
Right. When you were here last time, Tom, you were talking about all the spying that goes on. I think that was leading up to San Francisco, and you might have been part of it. I think the spying on the Kiwis, and you noticed how well they were foiling, and you went back to the team and said, I think we're in trouble here. Spying got out of hand, I believe, got really expensive. Mm-hmm. So then they introduced the reconnaissance program. Mm-hmm. Tell us how that works, because that's about shared data, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. Does that really work? Do you have to share your data? Do people hide the data? How does all that work?
Yeah, no data's shared in
Okay.
the reconnaissance program, but basically the filming of the teams, and part of the reconnaissance program was they could film the boat going in the water, so out of the shed in the water, so you got good footage, and then when they're in the water you could take footage of they took footage of the boat testing, different things they're trying, and then the sailing on the water. But yeah, it was just a cost-cutting measure. When you think about it, in the Bermuda Cup, we had six teams, so 5 other teams, and we had you need 2 people in each reconnaissance program, 1 to drive the boat, 1 to film, and so you needed 10 different people stationed around the world, 2 per team around the world, just to sit there on standby and wait to watch these guys. And every team had that same thing. So everyone had 10 spies working for them in each team to just go out and try to find details on the other team, and the costs of it it's I guess an unnecessary cost because they're all after the same information. So the Kiwis decided to bring in a rule where they share it all and share all the information that the old spies would have got. Maybe not as much info, but yeah, it's a cost-cutting measure and it does the job.
Right. What about the Brits? The Brits, they had a different looking boat as well. The whole aim of the America's Cup was to win it, but to get better and better as you go on the journey. And the Brits seemed to get better and better. They're a bit ordinary at the beginning. Mm-hmm. People were saying, it's, all their information, all the data they're sending to Brackley, which is the headquarters for the Formula One, Mercedes Formula One. Was that a factor or not really?
I do think it's a factor. And the British team now, for multiple campaigns, they start terribly and finish well. In the Bermuda America's Cup, they basically, maybe 2 months before the Cup, they're almost getting lapped by the other teams. And then all of a sudden in the last 2 months, they sort of found more speed and then became quite competitive. I think they still got knocked out second or something like that, but they got back in the game. Found out later, people probably don't know this, but they submitted a rudder. They built this new rudder right at the end, which was, by my understanding of the rule, was actually illegal. It had to do with basically the screws having play in them, and when the rudder was under load, it would create downforce through screws that were built-in design to have play in them. But the the measurement committee missed it, and so they actually got much faster. It would have been a big problem, I think, if they progressed through the America's Cup, because people would have been pretty angry about it. But they got knocked out early enough, so that wasn't a thing. And then in the 2021 Cup, same thing. I think they did that Christmas Cup before that, and they got beaten really easily. They lost every race, and then they came back and were competitive and lost to Luna Rossa in the Challenger final. And then this America's Cup in Barcelona, we basically hadn't lost a race to them we would have done 20 practice races against them from May to August, and we never lost to them in a practice race. And then all of a sudden the racing starts and they just had speed. We did a preliminary regatta before the round robin started, and they finished last or second last, I think. And then the round robin started and they won the round robin. So it was in the space of a couple of weeks. And I think that it's probably, I don't know this, but I think it's because they have had a huge workforce at Mercedes. The sailors and the actual team did an unbelievable job, but I think they had a lot of people behind the scenes there, whether it's crunching numbers, looking at footage, spotting differences, and they were able to adapt and improve quicker than anyone else.
So, as a segue to that, a lot of people and a big budget is not always the answer. What the Kiwis say is that often people go off on tangents, or the designers get carried away because they've got so much money to spend. So the Kiwis attack things very differently. Their rig was different. They had a rotating mast, to recall.
Yeah, we all had rotating masts, but the way they used that software was probably a little bit different. Yeah.
Right. So why were they more manoeuvrable?
The Kiwi team, the people ask me how are they winning, and they're actually, in my opinion, the best in every area. If you break it down into areas, the sail design, the foil design, the hull design, the sailing team, the control systems, I would put them over the other 5 teams. I would put them number 1 in every single category, and each one just is a small gain, and then it adds up to a big number where they have won the last 3 America's Cups. You look at, there's no weakness in their program. Their manoeuvrability was unbelievable. And we have in this last America's Cup what they call a closed control loop, which basically means you can join different functions together. So what that means is, in the past you had to individually press each button, whether it might be jib sheet on or jib Cunningham or Traveller or something. You had to press that button each time. You couldn't link things together. In this last America's Cup, where I'm sitting on this left-hand side here, and Goody's steering on this, it's probably Lucas Calabresi actually then, but he's steering. When we go into a manoeuvre, he presses one button, which drops the board, and as he turns, 17 different functions on the boat happen. The jib Cunningham eases, the jib track goes out, the jib sheet eases, the outhaul tightens for the manoeuvre and then eases, the Traveller goes to a set position, the mast rotation changes, the main sheet eases, main Cunningham. There's all these functions which can be controlled off one button. And so what that does is it puts a huge emphasis on the control system and how you program the boat and getting those programming systems right. And what you see with the Kiwis and what they were doing when they were testing on the dock with no sails up, when they would press the board down button, you'd see all these functions move on the boat and with a certain timing, and it's basically set. Like we were set off 1.8 seconds from when I pressed the board down to when the mast rotation would fire through, for example. But knowing all their settings on every single one, how do they ease 500 kilos of jib Cunningham, or do they ease 100 kilos, or all these sorts of things. There's so much programming and time and effort that go into it, and they were just steps ahead of everyone else in that regard, in my eyes. In the way that they use the control system, they were just so much better than everyone.
They also had a twin skin mainsail, didn't they? And separate main sheets for each skin.
Mm-hmm.
So what I hear is that they're more adaptable. They could put core depth into the sail when they want to very easily. They could flatten it out when they want to better than others. Is that a myth or not?
I would agree that they could. I don't think it made a difference. We were able to, you look how much depth we're able to get into the sail there. And what you can't see at the back of our twin skin mainsails, but we have them on each skin of the sail is on a different outhaul car. So as we go through a manoeuvre, they just completely invert the other way. So we were able to shape the sail exactly how we wanted. They probably did have more range that they could have used, but we're talking if you ask me, in the under 1 metre a minute around the racetrack, that's where their sort of double main sheet might have got them. But I also could be wrong. They could say it was actually a huge gain, that part, but in my opinion, I don't think it was a big factor.
Right. And their ride height stability was pretty good, apparently.
Yeah, definitely their ride height control, especially through manoeuvres, was unbelievable. And the thing what confused us was, I think Andy Maloney and Blair Tuke were both controlling the ride height from tack to tack, but it was their ability to look around and be essentially helping the boat sail. So Nathan Outridge or Peter's steering, and then you've got Andy Maloney saying, okay, good pressure coming here in 5 and all this. Our flight controller had to stare at the foil or the camera we had on the foil the entire time. He couldn't put his head up. If he put his head up, we would have gone down. But these guys, you look at their onboard footage, and because their heads were actually above the cockpit, you see Andy Maloney flying the boat, and he's looking around going, I think maybe top right's got better pressure, maybe we should lead them back here. And we're just like, their control system, which we couldn't see, which is inside the boat, must be so easy to use to fly this boat that it only takes 10% of their brain power to do that, whereas our system took 100%. And that guy was he had no involvement in the sailing of the boat because he had to concentrate on flying. So that was a huge factor as well, in my opinion.
So the way the Cup works, the defender sits out for another month through the semi-finals. Do you think they gain knowledge through that period? Or first I thought, that's a problem because they're not out in the water practicing, but I think they were. But is that an asset to sit back and observe?
There's pros and cons. Doing the racing is great because it sort of battle hardens the crew. But at the same time, they're sitting there, and before this point, they don't have any data on anyone. They don't know what speeds other teams are going, any of that sort of stuff. And so when they're sitting out watching the racing, they're going, okay, how much wind is there? 12.5 knots. Okay, they're doing 33 knots upwind. Okay, what's our target in that? Okay, we're supposed to aiming for 34.2 knots. Okay, we should have a slight advantage in this condition. And so they're able to see all the data and go, okay, where are we weak? Where are we strong? Where do we want to show our cards? Where do we want to hold back? So they might go, look, in 14 knots and up, we're actually a knot or two quicker than these guys, but let's not show them that until we actually have to, because if we show it now, then everyone goes, okay, we're 2 knots slower, how do we find more pace? Whereas if they think they're the same speed and in the game, then they're not going to be sitting there searching for every little bit. They think, hey, we're fast. So there's pros and cons with it all, and I know in the 2013 America's Cup where we were the defender at Oracle Team USA and Team New Zealand were racing the Challenger Series, that time watching them beat Artemis and Luna Rossa was hugely valuable for us. Everyone knows the story of us being down 8-1 and coming back, but if you did that match before the Challenger Series, we lose 9-0 every time. They were so much better than us, and then they went through the Challenger Series, beat Luna Rossa in the final, came to us, and then they were still much better than us, but probably a quarter of what they were 3 weeks earlier. But we learned so much watching them, how they sail the boat, how to keep the boat on the foils, that we got close, and then in the end we were able to catch them right at the death. But it had a lot to do with watching our competitors race before we lined up against them.
Tom, we'd all like to be a fly on the wall at these team meetings, America's Cup team meetings. You're sitting there with a bunch of guys that have got PhDs after their name and all the rest of these. You're telling me earlier that when you came into sailing you hadn't studied physics or anything like that, and you had to read up on it, and you had to try to keep up with what these guys were talking about. Do you often sit in meetings with these boffins that go on and off on into tangents, and you've got to pull them into line?
Rarely pull them into line. It's more I'm just sort of sitting there going, what are they talking about? But when I joined Oracle Team USA in 2011. I was still doing my laser campaign. I said, basically, I'll come and be with the team when I can, but my full focus is the Olympics in London, and then after London I'll come join you guys full time, and that'll be my focus. But I remember going into these meetings for the first time, and the terminology, I'm a lifelong sailor and I was about to go win a gold medal at the Olympics, but I'd come into these meetings and I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. And they're using all this terminology, and I got a really good piece of advice actually from a guy called Dirk de Ritter, but he said, I said, mate, I'm a bit unsure how to do this. Do they want me to talk? Do they want me to be involved? And he goes, Tom, you've got 2 eyes, 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that order. and in other words, shut the F up. And so I just basically took it all in. I just sort of used to watch, listen, take everything I could, spoke when spoken to, and just learnt as much as I could. And I always got told there's no such thing as a stupid question, and I actually believe that because every question you ask just fast tracks your learning. And so I used to just walk around the base just asking questions, and the designers would get sick of me because after a meeting, I wouldn't ask it often in a big meeting because I was a young guy in the team, but as soon as the meeting would finish, I'd go grab the floor designer and say, hey mate, laminar flow, what do you mean by laminar flow? What's the difference between laminar flow and turbulent flow? And then he would get the whiteboard up and draw it all for me and goes, okay, this is how it works. And I just had to learn. And then I also asked him, how can I learn more in the off time? And you were talking about long days before, and the America's Cup, and that campaign, we had gym at 6 o'clock in the morning, and if I got home before 9:30, 10 at night, that was basically my general day, and I'd do that we weren't weekends, you'd do it every day, and that's what the whole team do. But if I ever did get time, I wanted to study up and learn more, and I was single at the time, so I didn't have a family. I just said, I'm just fully immersed in this, so I'm going to learn as much as I can. And so they would give me different papers written by people who had degrees in fluid dynamics and aerodynamics and all this sort of stuff, and I'd just read and learn. And Google was a big part of my life, and and now I still go into some of these meetings and they're above my level of knowledge, but in general I can sort of hold my own now with them.
Right. I couldn't imagine someone like a Glenn Ashby, clever as he is, just sitting there listening all day and without interjecting and saying this is not practical.
Well, I think he learnt like I did. He's a sailor. He probably finished high school. I was just saying I was on the phone to Glenn just before I walked in here. We chat a lot about different things, and but I think he learnt exactly the way I learnt. But now he's so unbelievably good at it, and you would think Glenn's actually the designer in most of these conversations you have with him, but he's a sailor who learnt and just taught himself, and pretty unbelievable.
So we'll stick with foiling for a bit more. We'll talk about Moths. They're the ultimate little Formula One toy. You've won 2 world championships. You did well in Malchesney last year, was it? On Garda. And I visited the Moth Worlds at Sorrento 2015, I think. My son was having a go at it.
Yep.
And there are all these containers there. All the big America's Cup teams were there at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I thought, I'm going to have a sneaky look inside one of these containers. And I couldn't believe what I saw, but like 50 foils or something, all different sizes and shapes. And I thought, good grief, this is an amateur sport. So all the big boys were there. You were there, Tom. And I thought, where can this class go? Maybe this is it in terms of developments, because the costs will get out of control. But 10 years on, just keeps developing. So there's things like foil developments change. You've gone to composite steel and carbon. The mast seems to have got shorter, to lower the centre of effort.
Mm-hmm.
You've got sails virtually hanging down on the deck for that end plate effect, I suppose. Carbon everywhere. Powerful vangs, are they 60 to 1 or something?
Yeah.
Tell us about the developments, what's going on there.
Yeah, I think 54 to 1 is what I ran at the Worlds, but they say with our Vang system, we put basically the sail designers and the mast designers of these boats, they go, you guys are putting over 1.5 tons of load into the Vang. So you need these crazy systems to sort of deal with that load. When you think about it, the boats are doing, if it's 15 knots and up, I'd say my target boat speed was about 24, 25 knots upwind. So as with all these fast hydrofoiling boats, what that does is creates more pressure. It's like standing on a train. There might be 5 knots of wind, but you get on a train and you start going fast into that. what you feel is much more wind. So when we're going upwind at 25 knots and we feel, and there's 15 knots of wind, we're feeling 40 knots of wind on the sail. The boat doesn't, the sail doesn't know the difference between what's the true wind speed and what's the apparent wind speed, so it just knows what it's feeling. So you need to get flatter and flatter as the boat goes faster and faster. But yeah, the development's always going on. This is the 2019 Worlds, I think, in Perth, and I was on an Exocet boat back then, and carbon foils. The deck sweeper sails were in by then, but yeah, that boat now would not come in the top 50 at the Worlds, I'd say.
And you won those Worlds.
Won those Worlds, yeah. That was actually one of the, for me, just as a fan of sailing, I guess, it was one of the best Worlds because the first 3 boats were all different designs. I was first in the Exocet. Second place was Kyle Langford in the Mackay Beaker, the Beaker boat, which now dominates. And third was Tom Burton in the Mach 2. So since then, that hasn't really been done before or since, that there's actually you had a real choice of boats and what you went with. Now, if you don't buy the Beaker design, you've got no chance of winning, basically. And I think the top 12 or 15 boats at the Worlds were all Beakers. But yeah, the biggest thing now, the sail designs are always improving. They get cleaner. The rigs are always improving. But the biggest thing now is these steel foils. Basically, so steel compared to carbon has a much higher braking strength, but it's heavier. But what you can do with steel is you can build it thinner than you can carbon for the same strength. So if you're not concerned about weight, people go down the steel road. Historically, everyone's been really concerned about weight, and so it's always been on the table. It's actually, in some regards, it's cheaper to make a steel foil than it is a carbon foil in labour. But what everyone thought was, no, we need the boats to be lighter and lighter and lighter. But what we realised is just reducing that wetted area was a bigger factor, and having heavier foils isn't going to slow you down as much as we thought. And so steel foils came in a couple of years ago, and now, yeah, again, the top 20, 30 boats are all on steel foil. Actually, probably 50 boats are all on steel foils. And yeah, I love the Moth because the way I've always explained it is it's like a mini America's Cup campaign. And for an individual, you can go out, you're obviously not building it all yourself. Well, some people are, but I go out and I get at this boat, I got the Exocet. I decided there was all different boats on the market and they're all competitive. I go, look, I like the Exocet, I'm gonna go with that. And then I went with, okay, back then there was about 5 different sail designs, and I like the North sail, I'm gonna go with that. I like CST rigs instead of C-Tech rigs. And so you sort of take components from each one and build it together. And basically when you go through all the components, including like the different foils and foil sizes and different verticals and all different things, you can build your own custom boat that you go, okay, I think I want to concentrate more on the lighter air performance because I think I'm bigger and my hiking will save me in the heavy air performance. So I like focus on that, and you can build the boat around you to do that. And so I like to explain it as like my little own America's Cup campaign, where you sort of go out and you get all the different components, put it together, and then you rock up to the Worlds and see how it fares against everyone else. And I love the Moth, and I'd love to keep sailing it for as long as I can.
Yeah. So the sails have changed a bit even since then. I think the 3DI and structured luff technology that we normally associated with big yachts, that's come into Moth sailing.
Yeah.
Has that helped, or is that just a small part of it?
Yeah, it's definitely helped. And the boats are much faster, and they sort of have improved in all areas. But yeah, the structured luff sails compared to this, yeah, this was 2019, but yeah, they're much better, much cleaner. Now the masts have gotten much smaller, so they used to be, I don't know the actual diameter, but it's like a windsurfer mast, but it used to sort of be maybe that, and now they're very small, like the diameter of the mast, and you don't know how they don't break with the loads that they see, but they're incredible. But yeah, the sails are just really getting cleaner and cleaner, and they just and then a lot of people are there changing battens in between races and things like that. You can get as complex as you want, or you can just sort of keep it simple. At the Worlds this year, I kept it very simple with battens, and I used one sail all through the wind range. And some people like to have a light air sail, a heavy air sail, and all sorts of things. But some things I like just keeping simple, just clear mind, high card.
The thing I've noticed about Moths, just watching them, the videos of them, is they really exploit moding. They've got a wide VMG mode curve. Tell us about that. Like, how far are you wandering upwind?
Yeah, that is a really cool thing about the classes, and I guess generally foiling boats have quite a different they have quite a wide range of modes. But yeah, I would go anywhere in around a 5 to 6 knot difference potentially if there's a bit of breeze around. 5 to 6 knots difference in my VMG mode upwind. And so yeah, there's in Lake Garda, everyone talks about it as a one-way track, and you've got to get to the shoreline, but there's so many different ways that you do that. Whether you get a lift and pressure, do you go fast here, but that's going to line me up in a different part of the shoreline, because the shoreline isn't straight, it's always sort of moving in and out, and you might know different parts that you want to get into deeper, and so you would use your moding to sort of help that. I really like the boat because every single gust you've got a different opportunity. It's the way I look at it. Like when I used to talk about the laser sailing, 1 foot per wave, every wave is an opportunity to gain time on your competitor. But with this, I think of every gust as an opportunity. Every gust I see, every lull, we go through a gust and then I've got a lull ahead of me. I've gone, this is an opportunity to gain a metre on my guy next to me if I do this transition better than he does it. So I love that about this class, is there's plenty of metres there to be gained if you do it well.
So if you're in a gust and a lift, you're going to bear off a lot. How far are you going to bear off into low mode? Is it? It's not a few degrees like a laser.
Yeah, well, it depends how big the lift is. I mean, some people have different thoughts on it, and do you just keep the same? So the general rule is you get a lift and pressure and you go fast, and you get a header and you sail high. Just the way you transition through gusts and wind shifts. But some people just go like, that's my heading. If I get a lift and pressure, I just go faster on that heading, and then I get a header and I just go into a high mode, so I'm staying at the same point. I definitely steer around a lot, and generally when I'm sailing against other people, they go, it's crazy how much you're going up and down. Like they will sit next to me in a lineup, and 1 second I'm up underneath them, the next second I've shot off like doing 5 knots and 10 degrees lower. But if you're able to link it together, and I'm always looking at the next gust ahead, and I'm like, okay, I can see the next transition ahead. I see this transition, whether it's a gust, whether it's a lull. How do I want to hit that? Do I want to hit the top edge of it? Do I want to hit the bottom edge of it? If it's a light patch, where's the next bit of pressure going to hit me? Is it going to hit me on the lower side quicker? Or if I go through the middle, is that going to put me in it for longer? So I've got to avoid the middle. Do I want to be at the top or the bottom? But this is what I sort of talk about, is every single part of the course, whether it's a gust, a lull, whatever it is, I look at it as an opportunity to gain on the guy next to me. And as you probably can tell now, I overthink things. But I literally just break it. I just see every race there's thousands of opportunities to gain time on my competitors. A lot of people just go in a lineup and they just go, he's just quicker than me. I'm like, well, why is he quicker than you? Oh, he's beat me by 15 metres in that lineup. I'm like, okay, how long did the lineup go for? Oh, it went for 2 minutes. I'm like, okay, well, in 2 minutes, how many waves do you go through? I don't know, 70. I go, okay. All he needs to gain on you is this much every wave, and there's your 15 meters or something. I was like, that's so. If I said to you right now, you need to gain this much more than you were on each wave, do you reckon you could do it? You would probably go, yeah, I think I could do that if I really concentrate on it. Well, that's what the guy next to you is doing. He's concentrating harder than you will, and that's the way I always. I probably told this story last time, but this same story was told to me with Victor Kovalenko, and we're in Barcelona and we're sailing on this big wave day, and he said, what's your problem? Like, what are the top guys doing better than you? And I go, well, they're just quicker than me. He goes, well, how much quicker than you are they? I go, I don't know, I finished 5th and 4th or something, they probably beat me by 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And he's like, what's that, 50, 100 metres? I said, yeah, say 70 metres. And then he's like, okay, well, and he just broke it down. He goes, look, how many waves do you go through in a race? I go, I don't know, 200 upwind on the, maybe 300 on each upwind, 100 downwind, 300 on the next upwind. And I go, I forget what it was, but 700 waves in a race. And he's like, if you, okay, 70 metres, he goes, and he broke it up into 70 metres and he divided it by 700 or whatever it was. And he goes, it was this much or something. And he goes, do you think if you concentrated with all your concentration on a wave that you could get go this much better through it? And I said, easily. And he's like, well, there's your boat speed. It's a concentration thing. And he goes, and this is where 1 foot per wave came. Because he said to me, how much do you think you could get on a wave, an advantage on your competitor if you really focused on it? I said, I reckon I could get 1 foot per wave on him. And he goes, okay, well, you've got 700 feet, you can be faster. If you were 700 feet quicker around the race course, would you say you're a fast boat? I was like, absolutely. And different things resonate with you that click in your mind. And I remember that just clicked for me, and I was just like, okay, boat speed, I used to think it was a mythical thing that, he's just faster. Like, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm doing my best. But when it got broken down into that way, I've just got to get 1 foot per wave faster. And that just became my mantra. And I just learned that. And it goes into every type of sailing now, whether I'm flying above the waves and I can't concentrate on the waves. Now my focus is on each transition, each gust, each lull, each mark rounding. Every little bit, every opportunity around the course is an opportunity for me to gain a foot on my competitor. And yeah, that's sort of the mentality I always have.
All right, just keeping with those tips you were talking about, reading wind. We all reckon we can read wind. We know the dark spots mean it's windier, but there's a lot more to that. Sometimes, you go out and you think, is this going to be a lift or a header? And half the time I don't really know. You must have an eye for it. You've developed an eye for it. I remember last time you were here, you talked about sitting on the balcony at home at Gosford, at your mum and dad's place, and you watched the gusts going along the water. Then you imagine yourself sailing into those gusts and whether you'd tack onto port or tack onto starboard. And so you've obviously got very, very good at reading wind. Can you give us some tips about that? Like when you're sailing a Moth at 20 or 30 knots or whatever, there's a gust coming in 2 seconds, you're going pretty quick. I don't know how you read whether it's a lift or a knock, but I'm not specifically just talking about Moths, but just generally, how do you read the wind?
Well, yeah, I mean, I probably, again, told this story. My dad, when I got into sailing and I started getting a bit more serious with it, my dad was a sailor and a good sailor, but he sort of never raced super competitively. But he just got a whiteboard up and drew on the whiteboard. He goes, okay, here's a gust. He drew a circle and he said, every gust has a lift and a knock on it. And it's got to do with how you enter that gust. And so he sort of drew up on the board the big circle, and he goes, you're coming in on starboard. If you hit the gust here, what's going to happen? And back then I didn't know. I'm like, I have no idea. And he goes, well, he basically, on the edge of the circle, he drew like little arrows basically with how the gust forms. And here in the middle of it, it's dead straight, and as you come along this, on the sort of left-hand side, it sort of comes out and it sort of rotates around each side, and same on the other side, it rotates back the other way. And he sort of just drew this for me on a whiteboard, and then I sort of, for whatever reason, it clicked with me, and I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then when I was on the water, I just started looking at all the gusts and go, okay, well, that's this shape, so if I hit the gust at this angle, I'll get a lift. And it's all about lining and joining the dots together and getting it going. And then I went sailing with my dad about a year later, and then and I'm like there going, okay, it's going to lift here for 10 seconds and it's going to go right, and there's going to be, we'll tack and we'll get a good 15-degree lift on starboard. And then Dad sort of was looking at me like I was some sort of witch or something like that. And he's like, and he said to me, how do you know that? And I said, you taught me it. How don't you know it? He goes, yeah, I know the theory of it, but I don't know how to see it. And I said, well, it's exactly what you taught me. You said it's just lining up the gusts, and it's the position that you enter the gust is whether it lifts or knocks. There's a lift and a knock on every single gust. It's just got to do with the angle that you hit it. And I just sort of developed a knack for doing that. And we went back to the bar after, and I wasn't in the bar, but I could see my dad there, and he's just, I was the joke. He's like, you should see what he does. He can tell you if the wind's going to lift or not. But I remember I was just sort of shocked, because I'm like, you taught me how to do that. Why is it so shocking? But it's just something that you see it so many times, and I don't get on the water that much anymore. Just with the way SailGP works, you've got no training. The boat gets put in shipping containers off to the next venue. You get 1 hour of training the day before racing starts, and then you're into it. So I actually don't get on the water very much anymore, but it just lives with me forever. Basically, these lessons that my dad taught me on how to line up the gusts perfectly, and you watch it close enough, and when you sail a boat like a Moth or a foiling boat, because it's coming so quick, you have to really concentrate on it, and the split second that it hits, you have to know what is going to happen. Okay, is this going to lift me? Do I have to ease the sheet? Because in a foiling boat, the most important thing for boat speed is angle of heel, stable angle of heel. It actually, if you ask me anything for all of sailing, whether it's a laser, a TP52, a maxi, for me the most important thing in boat speed is a steady rig. It doesn't matter if it's a few degrees further into windward or a few degrees more heel or not. If it's stable, the boat will track so much faster. And if anyone who's doing back and forth, they're just not going to keep up with someone who can keep it stable. So as a gust hits me, I have a look at the gust and go, okay, I think this is going to lift and pressure. So my first thing is to ease sheet. So as it hits me, I'm like easing the sheet, like the split second, so the boat doesn't go on its side, it just keeps tracking exactly the same. And so I've really concentrated on that initial hitting of every gust and what it's going to do, even if it's a header. If it's a header and I'm in a laser and I'm already block to block and I have to see the gust just before it hits me, and I go, okay, there's a header coming here, so I bear away a couple of degrees just before it hits me. And I preempt what's going to happen, because obviously you can't sheet on anymore, there's nothing else you can do there. So as I enter the gust, I was just bearing away just so slightly, just to keep the angle of heel exactly the same. But that's what I like to use as the way to, obviously the gust thing, everything has a lift and a knock, but the way you react to the gust has so much to do with just preempting what's going to happen.
So there are different types of gusts, of course. The gusts that catch me out, or change in wind that catches me out, and probably most people, is that sort of dumping layer of breeze. So you sail over to it and over to it and over to it, and you end up on the ley line and it still hasn't come to you, hasn't moved. Yeah. And then you blast or something. And then the other one is that persistent progressive shift, and you're on the outside of the wheel and you can't get back. Mm-hmm. So you must be reading all that sort of stuff. How do you do that?
That's probably my biggest weakness as well, is a persistent I'm one of those people who, especially in my laser career, I I love the small gains and I play the percentages. Like if I've got a 70% of the fleet to my right and I'm heading left and I get a little header, just a little header, doesn't need to be much, I'll take it. And I go back. I'm not searching for something bigger. I'm like, I want to put 70% in my pocket and then I'll catch those 30% later. I was always that guy who's just played the percentages, just chipped away and kept the game close. And I always had a saying in lasers, you give me a meter and I'm never giving it back to you. Like, whereas I'm going to wear you down just with sort of, I used to have this sort of saying, I sort of used to smother my opponents where if I got a meter on you, I used to tell myself, I'm not going to make a mistake. Why would I let you split to the other side of the course? I'm just going to stick with you because I'm going to not make a mistake. And then if you make another mistake trying to get away, I'll take another meter and then I've got 2 meters and I'm never going to give it back to you. But yeah, the persistent shifts were always one that got me because I'll take the small gain and knowing is it going to go further and stuff like that. It just came down to eyes out of the boat, head on the water and just looking and is there a telltale sign? If you thought, obviously you need to be tipped off, is there a persistent shift coming here? Was that reading the forecast? Was it looking up the course and there's another fleet of boats that look like they're further out there? Is there a flag or something like that? It's just sort of heads out of the boat and seeing opportunities, just going, hey, wait a second, that yacht up the harbour is like another 15 degrees further left than these guys. There must be something more coming here. And then just risk versus reward was, do I take the risk and gamble on it? Is it 1 yacht or is it 10 yachts? Is it 1 yacht that might have a motor on that I don't know about and he's just got the jib flapping? There's all sorts of things to it. Is you just got to go, okay, risk versus reward here. Do I dig into this further or do I just take the small gain? But yeah, I don't have any gems for a persistent shift because I still struggle to this day.
Okay, that's good. We'll move on to SailGP. That's the sexy end of the sport for a lot of people these days, I think. So when it was launched, probably 5 years ago now, Russell Cootes talked a big story and it's going to be a big thing, and there were a lot of doubters. But they've made it work. You know, it's in over 200 countries now. I think the audience size is something like 215 million a year. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a very ambitious project they took on, and when we lost the America's Cup, a lot of people don't know this story, but when we lost the America's Cup in 2017, we lost to the Kiwis 7-1, and I remember I was standing on stage and I was standing next to Larry Ellison, and we were there waiting, they're doing all this big announcement, we're on stage for coming second in a 2-boat race. I don't know why they gave us a medal for that. But we're standing there and waiting for the Kiwis to come out. And I remember Larry's next to me and we used to speak a little bit back then, but not a lot. And I just turned to her and said, mate, I'm so sorry we lost this. We shouldn't have lost this. That's like inexcusable. And Larry said to me, he said, oh, don't worry about Tom. This actually is a good thing. Now I can do something that I've always wanted to do. And I said, oh, okay, like, what are you thinking? And he said, oh, I'm going to create something new. I'm going to create a new sailing league. And then the Kiwis came up and won the cup, and backstage I asked him more about it. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, with the America's Cup, we're just bound down by the deed of gift, the protocol, these rules that were written in, was it 1850 something, 1862. Those rules still apply in the America's Cup today. And he goes, it's just so outdated. You can't evolve the sport when it's stuck with this deed of gift. And he goes, I want to create a new sailing competition, country versus country competition. I want to go fast foiling boats, go to exciting venues. I want to push the envelope on what's possible with this sport. And I remember that it was right then and there, I just said, well, if you do that, I want to be a part of it and I'll come with you. And and sure enough, after that America's Cup, I still got offers to do the 2021 Cup because teams start recruiting almost the next day, basically. And I said no to all the teams that offered me a job and said no, and I couldn't tell them what I was doing. So I just said, no, I just don't want to do the America's Cup anymore. I'm going to step away. But it was because I wanted to do this SailGP league. Moved on now, and I mean, back in season 1, we started with 5 events, 6 teams, 5 events throughout the year. And now we're at, we've got 14 events this year, 13 teams, and I see the 10-year plan for this thing, and it's pretty amazing what they've got planned. I mean, they're talking of going to 20 teams, 10 versus 10 sort of format. They're talking of going to 20 plus venues per year, and it's just really ambitious what they're doing. And the thing I love about SailGP is because it's such consistent racing, and Russell Coutts, who's the leader of it all, we try things every single event, and whether it's a success or a failure, he just goes, okay, let's try shorter races, let's try a different course, let's try something different, and then if it doesn't work, he just goes, okay, that's off the table, let's do something else. But we learn all these times through the year. With the America's Cup, it happens every 4 years, and they've got one chance to get it right. There's no practice events where you lead up, and I think the America's Cup this time has announced one preliminary regatta in 2026, and then the America's Cup is in 2027. So it's hard for them to get the package right of the race format, the broadcast, all these different things. But it seems to, with SailGP, you're just constantly evolving, constantly improving, learning from your mistakes, and I think it's getting better every year. The racing is certainly getting tougher every year. I mean, obviously adding more boats, and we go to, the races are smaller and smaller, and the racetracks are tiny, and it's tough, and you've got to keep evolving with it. But I just think, I love that, pushing the envelope of what's possible, and sometimes we go overstep it, whether it's the crash in New Zealand, whether it's the wings collapsing on us in San Francisco last year, there's all these things where they're pushing the envelope a lot, and it can get dangerous for sure, but we're just constantly trying to improve the sport. And the way I see it, for me at least, is let's push this sport and get sailing to the best place I possibly can before I retire, and then hand it on to the next generation, and then they're in a good place with something exciting that people pay a lot of money to come see, and all of a sudden there's a huge career in it for those guys. So it's a bit controversial, but when you think of a sailing league, there's never been a sailing league that's actually taken off. There's things like the Extreme Sailing Series or different things which come up and they show a little bit of light for a little while and then they fade away. But SailGP every year, and I see the broadcast numbers, and like you said, it's just growing year on year. And SailGP's appeal, they said, look, we know we can get the sailing community behind us. We know that sailing fans will tune in, but that's not our market. We want to compete with F1. We want to compete with the Football World Cup. We want to compete with NFL, NBA, all these sports. Like Russell's like, I'm not even concerned about the America's Cup. Everyone thinks of this big rivalry between Russell Coutts and Grant Dalton and the America's Cup versus SailGP. And Russell goes, I'm not focused on those guys. If I'm focusing on them, we've lost already. He goes, I'm focusing on NBA, F1. These are the guys I'm targeting and trying to get to. And I think it shows in the way it's all coming across. I mean, we are dealing with Mother Nature. You're going to have good events and bad events. And here in Sydney a few weeks ago, obviously the wind didn't play ball and you don't get an exciting product, but that's just going to be the nature of our sport, and that's one of the hurdles we face, and the battle is just doing the best with the conditions you have, and I think SailGP does a pretty good job.
You mentioned earlier, Tom, that you don't get to spend a lot of time on the water, and with SailGP you've got limited time on the water. What are you doing in the week leading up to it? Is it logistics, or are you on the simulator, or what are you doing?
So in between events we basically just do a lot of debriefing. So as you know with SailGP, everything is shared data. So we can see all of the other teams' onboard footage. We can hear all their onboard comms. We can see all their data on board. We have data reports which basically average out everything and say, okay, this team's running more lift on the rudder, this team's running more camber in the wing, this team's doing this or that. So we study that data and we have debriefs as a team and we talk about, okay, where did we go wrong last event? What are the things we can improve on? What did we do well? What did we do poorly? And how are we going to be better at the next event? So unlike normal sailing or normal sport even, you're training in between each event. We don't have that luxury. We get 1 day of training and it's often about an hour and a half of training, and we have to have a plan as we hit the water that day of a checklist of things that we need to tick off, whether it's tack barrelways, whether it's working on our windage for how the crew sit together in the boat, whether it's start, time on distance, whether it's positioning in a pre-start, whatever it is, we've got a checklist we have to tick off in that time. And it's a super small amount of time when you think of all these different aspects and you've only got an hour to do it. You've got like 5 minutes on each one, and then you go, okay, that's the end of your training, and then you're straight into racing the next day. So we usually, a general event is we used to arrive on the Thursday, but then the sailors started pushing that a bit late and arriving late Thursday, like bloody midnight, and then jet lag, and then they rock up the next day and on the boat. So now we've changed our team policy. We arrive on the Wednesday night. We've got a day to get over jet lag, go into the base, look over our areas, make sure everything's right. And on the Thursday and then the Friday, we do our practice day, racing Saturday, Sunday, and then fly out Sunday night or Monday morning.
But do you get on the simulators at all?
Yeah, we book in for the simulator Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If I'm honest, our simulator is not very good for sailing the boat. It's good for getting us all together with the same hardware, and we all sit in the cockpits together and we talk about the way we would be talking on the boat. Whether it's, okay, time to kill, 7 to kill, you're above the shutout lay at the boat end, okay, pressing here to go in 3, 2, 1, okay, building speed, standby jibe, all that sort of communication, it helps. But our simulator needs work on actually the way you sail the simulator is quite different to how you sail the boat. And so they're working on that. That's a big focus of SailGP, is to get that simulator much better so it's as close to identical as it can be so you can actually train people on that simulator, and then it equates to experience on the water.
I'd imagine the simulator doesn't teach you the feel that you need to have, ride height and all that kind of stuff. What's optimum? Does it help you with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the same control systems in the simulator as it is on the boat. And Jason Waterhouse, he's got a screen which has exactly what he sees on the boat, his field of vision on the boat. And so he can see the foil, he can see the bow, and he sits there and does it. But he said the actual dynamics of it, he said, like, I have to move the simulator way less than I actually do in real life. So the sort of fluid dynamics of going through waves and the interface of all that needs work, but he can get exactly the same view that he's got on the water. And he says, look, it's good for me for muscle memory, just learning where all my buttons are so I don't have to look and different things like that, but it is still quite different.
I can picture in 20 years' time we've got a second story here, a whole bunch of simulators up there, and when there's no wind or too much wind, we'll all be up there.
Yeah.
All right, tell us about the starts. I'm fascinated with how you can get a good start. I know there's data coming at you, you've got the tools. We have trouble getting a good start in lasers, getting our time and distance right. Sometimes when I look at the lineup, I think, where would I start? Top end, bottom end, pros and cons. I've got no idea because you can't really see the wind angle on TV. But what are the thought processes with the starts?
Yeah, the starts are the hardest part of this sort of racing. I mean, we often get compared to the F1, and you think of us compared to F1, you think of they've got a grid position and still they have a lot of crashes and everything that happen on turn one, even with a grid position. We're sitting there and our pre-start at 2-3 minutes to go often, we're all sitting there fighting for position already and getting into position, but you're coming into the start and obviously hitting the line with pressure on a reaching line. It's much easier on an upwind start because you know people only have a certain groove that they can really set. People aren't bearing away and jibing in an upwind start. You know what people are going to do. You know they're going to work their gap. It's very predictable. In our game, with everyone on foils, it's incredibly unpredictable. You sit there and go, okay, I'm going to tack under this guy, and that should put me on a boat and ley line, and you can do everything you think right, and then all of a sudden you just touch down out of that tack, and the guy behind you hooks you and luffs you up and puts you above the boat end or something like that. It's such a fluid, dynamic environment, the pre-start, and you sit there and you can do everything just perfectly, and then when you pull the trigger at exactly the right time, you press the boat at exactly the right time, and everything is done, you're in the perfect spot on the line, but then for whatever reason, there's half a knot less wind than there was 2 seconds earlier, and the boat takes 3 seconds longer to pop on the foil than it did with half a knot more earlier, and then all of a sudden everyone shoots off and you sit there and you're just like, we did everything perfect, and then the wind died tiniest bit and we couldn't pop on the foil, and then everyone looks at it on the broadcast and go, oh, what a shit start. and there's hundreds of things that have to go right to just actually nail it, and and it's, as I said, it's just such a fluid thing, and with the way these drivers and teams are, everyone is so aggressive that if you've got an opportunity to screw over the guy next to you, you take it. If it's not going to affect you, well, that's my motto, is if it doesn't affect me, I'll take it. You got guys there who, even if it affects them, they just go for you anyway. And so it's incredibly hard to get it right. We've got software on the boat, but basically the number that we're looking at in the most important number we have is time to kill. And what that is if I sail at the start line at full speed, I'll get there the number to kill, 7 seconds time to kill, I'll get there 7 seconds early. If I pull the trigger at 7 seconds to kill and race as quick as I can, it should say I was 7 seconds early. So where the number you hear, and if you hear the onboards, people often get confused going, like, there's 22 seconds to the start and this guy's talking about 6, 5.5, 5.4, and they're like, what are they talking about? They're talking about the time to kill number, and basically we've got to get that number down before we pull the trigger. But the thing is, if you just get rid of that time to kill and you come in with max speed, like on your zero, again, so many things have to go right. If the wind dies off half a knot on your approach back, if you have to go under a couple of boats and go through their disturbed air, you're going to lose more time than the software has you going. So people often, everywhere I go, and there's a lot of armchair experts out there, but everyone says, oh, why don't you start like the French do? And because the French, every single time, we call it a slingshot start, where they basically sit behind the pack and then they wait for the time to kill to come down to almost zero, and then they go full speed, and then they look for a gap, try to find a gap and punch through. And they look like absolute rock stars a lot of the time. And I remember in Perth, they just were nailing it every time. But if you actually look at the season or generally events or the start statistics, it's pretty rare for them to feature anywhere near the top. And we were generally the team that is always into the start box early. We aren't foiling. We'll sit there in what we call H1, just one hull in the water, and then we sort of just pick our spot and trigger pull and go. We led the start statistics for the first 3 years, and we were second in season 4, and season 5 we dropped down to 6th or something. And when we dropped down to 6th, what we tried to do was actually add a lot of structure to the pre-start situation, where we said, okay, let's tack on this timing, let's tack in exactly this point in the pre-start at this time. And I started doing that, and it was just too dynamic a situation where you're not adapting to the circumstances around you. You're not looking at the wind going, okay, wait, there's a big lull between me and the line. I'm going to go with 5 seconds to kill instead of 0 because it's going to take me longer to get there. And the structure actually was hurting us a lot. And so now we're going to switch it up and go back to a bit more fluid and a bit more instinct and a bit more, there's a gust, let's go. Okay, this guy's going early, let's hold back and just play the situation a bit more than we have been and see how that goes. But sometimes you just feel like it's the easiest thing in the world starting, and then other times you just can't get it right.
Wouldn't be easy. There's a boundary too in the pre-start, isn't it? How come some boats go outside the boundary? Because don't you have data or map? You can see where the boundary is clearly?
Yeah, we have basically it's a distance to boundary, it's a meters number. But what that entails is a lot depends on the angle that you're approaching it. And like if you're approaching the boundary on an upwind angle and basically you're sailing along, on that angle right there, it might be 100 meters to boundary, but it's actually 10 seconds. But if then you get a header as you're coming into the boundary, and in a lot of these locations, we're racing right under a city front. Like in New York, you're right under the Manhattan skyline. Here on the harbour is one of the best tracks, but in Auckland, we were right under the skyline there as well. So it's very shifty. But then if you're going into, so it's 100 meters and 10 seconds to the boundary, but then all of a sudden you get a header and you start approaching it this way, that 10 seconds and that 100 meters will probably reduce to 4 seconds. And so as the boat goes up and down, that number is very hard to get right. And in the pre-starts, we for example, we got a boundary penalty in the final of the Fremantle event in the last race. And we went back and looked at it and go, how did we make that mistake? And the number, like I cited the distance to boundary and it was 195 meters. And then I said, okay, stand by. Thinking I wasn't even worried about going over the boundary, but as Glen Ashby crosses the boat, as we get into position and then we hit board down, it took us 3-4 seconds. And then you go into your turn of the boat, we broke the boundary by 1 meter. But that all happens, that 190 meters disappears. I think, well, at 45 knots, I think you're traveling, 30 meters a second or something like that. So it disappears unbelievably quick. And for you to predict exactly to get as close to the boundary as you can without going over it, sometimes we just break it by accident, and sometimes it happens. And sometimes, like, these boats aren't perfect as well. Sometimes the software on the screen freezes and you sit there and see the number coming down and then it just blanks and you go, it says I've got 8 seconds. But it's just stuck on 8 seconds, and then it comes to and you've got 2 seconds, and you're like, oh, fuck. And you get another one. So, I mean, things like that do happen as well. And sometimes even when you put the foil down, you just lose, we call it losing the rudders, but you lose grip. You're too high on the foils and they just wash out and you slip sideways and you break the boundary. So it happens often.
Speaking of slipping sideways, referring to New Zealand in Auckland, wasn't it?
Yep.
And that first reach is absolute drag race to get round that first mark in good position, good shape. Ride height would be critical, maximising the ride height. How do you know that the ride height's too high? Because I don't know if that's what the Kiwis did, and they lost traction. The foils were not in the water but on the water, and suddenly it was going every which way. Mm-hmm. Tell us about managing ride height.
Yeah, it's a real tough one because, obviously the higher you go, the less drag you have and the faster you go. But you get to a certain height and you start losing, there's too much vertical of the foil out of the water, and you start losing your side force that you've got all the wind pressure against. So you start slipping sideways. And coming out of that is not that simple. For example, the Kiwis, when they actually crashed down, like at the quarter of a second before they crashed, they're actually doing 12 knots sideways. Everyone sees the boat speed number forward and they go, they were doing 92 k's an hour when they went down, but they were doing 92 k's forward and 25 k's sideways when it happened.
And they would have known that.
You don't
You'd
know.
feel it? Or?
You can feel it, yeah.
Yep.
You know, you can feel it on the helm, you can feel it in the boat, you can feel it in the G-forces that you're not tracking forward, and you start feeling yourself going sideways. And when you start going sideways, you lose a lot of the authority over the foil. You can still rake the foil forward to bring you back down, but it has way less effect once you start slipping sideways. And it's really hard because, I mean, we're all sitting there pushing as hard as we can. And for example, a real common situation is you might be you're the boat to windward, you've got a boat that's overlapped by 2 or 3 meters just to leeward of you, and you're trying to break the overlap before the mark zone and own that mark, and so roll over the top of them. So all you want to say to your flight controller is just push higher, push higher, push higher. But if he pushes a little high there and we start slipping sideways, we'll just slip sideways into them and have a crash. So it's almost counterintuitive. If you've got a boat there, you've actually got to make sure you have grip. And so I sort of say to our guys that if we've got a boat right there, as much as I want to go higher and break overlaps and punch, just get ahead of the pack and lead and take off, I actually say the other thing. I actually say I want grip in those situations, because worst thing that can happen is having some of these crashes. A, unbelievably dangerous, like people can get so seriously injured and worse, and then B, these boats are fragile. If they touch in any way, it takes a long time to repair them, which we're seeing now with the Kiwis being out. But so it's a really tough balance, because if it's very controllable situations, like controllable conditions, say it's 12 knots, dead flat water, winds blowing onshore, so it's not that shifty, we will push it much harder, and we'll go, okay, this is the conditions we can get really close, like Jason Waterhouse, our flight controller, can get right on the edge. But then if it's shifty, patchy, gusty, whatever it is, we back off.
Or choppy?
Yeah, the waves are a huge part. I mean, in Perth, it didn't look like much on camera, but I mean, the waves, our foils are about, to the T intersection when it's fully down, is about 1.55 metres to the T intersection of the foil, and the waves there were 1.5 metres. So it's hard, because you want to keep this fly height, but you're going through these waves of 1.5 metres, and that's basically touching the hull and then the foil popping out of the water. And you've got to try to manage that, where if we saw a bad set of waves, we basically said, look, happy to put the boat in the water instead of popping the foil out of the water and crashing. And it's got to do with risk management. But then if you're both reaching into the finish, and you've got, for example, I don't know if people remember, but in Perth, in the final, the British won, and then we were coming into the finish with the French. There's 100 metres to go, and we're in a drag race, and we're bow on bow, not sure who's going to get it, and they're not close to us. They're like probably 20, 25 metres away, and so I said, look, push here, because we've got the range. We can slip sideways, but this is the end of the race.
25 metres is going to be absorbed very quickly, isn't it?
It
if
does.
It goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It gets absorbed really quickly. And I mean, some of the time you have to make some of these decisions, and it's just so small, and you've got to make a decision, and how quickly things happen is very hard to adapt to.
I can't believe the coordination that must be needed between the flight controller, the trimmers, helmsman, all working together. If one's out of sync, you're in trouble.
Yeah, but the way, I mean, it's I guess science is the word I'm thinking, but if Jason gets a little bit high on his ride height, what I do, if I know he's gotten too high and he's struggling to catch it, I bear the boat away, so I turn down, because what that does is load that foil up. If I turn up in that instance, all it does is that increases, because the foil's on the outside of the boat, it increases the speed that foil sees, and it creates more lift again. So I help him, and if we're too low, if we're too high there, I'll steer into it, and the wing trimmer will try to sheet on to load the sail plan against the foil to try to help him. And it's the same thing if he's too low and he's struggling to get us out of the water. What I do is I turn up. Like if we're struggling to pop on the foils and we go 3, 2, 1 popping here and then the boat's not really coming, I'll turn up to get the outside foil seeing more speed through the water. So again, the foil, like the sail plan, it doesn't know how quick you're actually going. All it knows is how much it's seeing. So if I turn up the foil on the outside of the boat, if I steer hard up to my right and the foil's on the left, it will go faster through the water. So it creates more lift. And so I can help him there. So when these things start going wrong, the flight controller gets too high or whatever it is, we all try to cover each other's backs.
Okay.
So if Jason gets too high, if I've got if I don't have a boat below me, I'll bear away and try to press on that foil to help him get it under control.
Oh, okay.
If I don't have the room to bear away because I've got a boat underneath me, then it goes to our wing trimmer Goobs. He's going to try to sheet on or close the twist of the sail to load that foil again for him to help him out. And so that's the way we sort of talk about it. And same with the jib trimmers. The grinders grind the wing on, and then the jib trimmer will pull on the jib sheet at the same time, trying to load that foil back up and help him. But we talk about this sort of stuff. If things start going wrong, how can we help you get out of it? And because if we crash, we never say we crashed because Jason got too high. We say we crashed because we flew too high, because we made a mistake. And I like to think it's a full team effort to get, whether you get into that situation or getting yourself out of that situation, it's on all of our shoulders, not just a flight controller.
We're going to move on to non-foiling boats, or a class in particular, the TP52, which you've sailed on a lot. That boat, I think, South African boat, Phoenix.
Yep.
And we'll focus on your role, which is largely the tactician, because we're all tacticians here, you know. I watch the Super Series and the Rolex World Championships on TV, and it's just fantastic to watch. It's the ultimate non-foiling boat. So as a tactician, you're kind of pivotal. You're the voice of the boat, I suppose, and there's a dozen guys on it or whatever. Yeah. So tell me about the role of a tactician and how tacticians get it wrong. And how does it coordinate with the strategist, the steerer? These steerers are often, or always, I think, owner-drivers. Yeah. So they're not always the best steerers. Mm-hmm. So how you manage them, that'd be interesting. Tell me about your role.
Yeah, so tactician on the boat. I sailed with this team quite a bit about 4 years ago. They got me involved. It's an owner. We're on an owner-driver boat. It's probably 50-50 actually, owner-driver versus pro-drivers, which I think's a bit weird. I think you should make it pro-driver or make it owner-driver, and everyone follows the same rule. But that's the way they do it. But sometimes the owner drivers can do really well. They're very, very good owner drivers. Like some of them have grown up sailing and then haven't sailed for a while and they just came back into it. But the Super Series is the hardest. It's the top level of monohull tactical yacht racing, I think. And it's really tough because the boats are very, very similar in speed, and it's a real matter of, but they're not identical boats. These aren't one design boats.
There's a box rule, isn't it?
There's a box rule.
So there's some scope for variation.
And some boats have a little bit more speed in lighter airs, stronger airs. Some have a good high mode upwind. Some have a good fast mode downwind. And so you got to know your competitor and who you're next to off the line and what their tendencies are. Does their driver try to stay high? Does the boat allow it? So there's a lot of different things that go into it. But we generally, our boat here, we were a quick boat upwind, and then we changed the keel fin, the vertical part of the keel. We changed that, and we lost a lot of our upwind speed and went as a faster boat downwind. It's really, as a tactician, it's really a game of chess on water, and as the tactician doesn't do much. You let off a runner in the manoeuvres, just take it off the winch, but that's about it. So you're purely there just trying to map out the best course. But the hardest bit is trying to predict what your opposition are doing the whole time. So I will sit there and just go, okay, well, this guy here is going to cross me. Is he going to tack on me? If he tacks on me, what am I going to do? Do I want the left side? Do I want the right side? If he tacks on me, I want the left side, he wants the left side. So how do I get him to tack too early, too late? So as we're coming to the intersection, sometimes I'll say, okay, let's bear away 5 degrees and pretend like we're in a bit more of a header than we are, and then hope that he tacks a little bit too early, and then we can come up, back on the wind, and live on his hip if I want the left-hand side. If he tacks on me and I want the right-hand side, that's fine. But and then if he's crossing me and I want the right-hand side, he wants the right-hand side, how do I set that up right? I can't tack under because the next manoeuvre he'll be in a position to tack on me. So I've got to go past his line, tack on his hip in a close enough position that he can't do a double tack and tack on me. I've got to tack so close on his hip and be able to live in that lane that he can't do 2 tacks, but I've got clear air across to the right-hand side. So it's really about mapping out your opposition and playing a game of chess. You're often thinking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. Okay, he's going to tack on me here, I'll go out here. Then when we next intersect, he'll have the left-hand side. I want to bait him back to the left there because we're close on that ley line, and I can take the right-hand side, take the long tack. There's just so many different things that are playing into it. And it's amazing how many people now think I'm just a foiler and I have no background in non-foiling boats. And so, but this sort of stuff, lasers, this sort of stuff, for me, that's my comfort zone. I actually feel much more comfortable in this sort of world and lasers and slow boat moving classes than I do at the fast boat ones, because this is what I grew up with. I was sailing and going to the Olympics well before foiling was a thing, and I really love this game, and I love the game of chess. And this I don't know if this was a regatta, but I came back to Phoenix for their final event. They've been asking me to come back for 3 years since I left the program to do the America's Cup and SailGP, and they've been asking me to come back every year. And I said, I'm sorry, the schedule clashes, I can't do it. But they said, well, this is our final event we're doing in Sardinia. This was last September. Can you come back and be part of the team for their final event? And so I went back and did that, and it was great. It was we ended up finishing second, but we were right in the hunt till the end, and they're a great group of people, and they were part of the Super Series for about eight or 9 years before I joined the team. And I joined the team, and we got really close a few times. We actually were leading the world titles in the last race. Going down the last run, we were going to win the world championships by 6 points, I think. And going downwind, and it was about 20 knots, and we had to do basically I'm saying to the guys, look, no mistakes, keep it clean, and we're going to win this. I didn't say those words, luckily. And Quantum coming across, should we jibe inside them? No, that means they could potentially lock us out. Let's just duck them, jibe on the inside, concede them. They were first, we're second, and the boat we had to beat was way back. And we came up for a duck, and 20 knots, you get a bit broachy, obviously. We didn't broach, but the spinnaker did load up more, and we blew the spinnaker out on the last run to the finish. And so we're trying to pull the spinnaker in, making sure it doesn't prawn, and we're trying to get another spinnaker out of the hatch and get another spinnaker up. We ended up losing 6 boats, and 2 boats beat us by 1 second, and we lost the world title on countback. And the team, at this point, the team had still never even won an event, let alone the world title. And so that was really tough for the team, and we never got the world title, but the following event, we got a win in Palma, and we won. And I've won a lot of events, but funnily enough, that was one of the most memorable wins for me, these guys have been trying for 10 years, training, doing everything, and they'd never won an event on the Super Series. And when we won that event, like, people were just crying all around me. And you forget what it means to some people, because I'm a hired gun in a lot of this world where I get paid to come sail with teams. But I had grown a real connection with this group, and I kept saying, look, we're going to win this. We're going to win an event soon. It's going to come. Like, trust me. And then when it did happen, and just to see the look on everyone's face was something I'll remember forever. And it makes you realise sometimes that there's a lot bigger things at play than just, I mean, obviously the results, but helping someone else win was unbelievably sort of gratifying.
That would be very rewarding. So as a tactician, you're calling the modes. So how does it work? You say, like, we're in a stronger breeze, we're in a lift, we need to go in a low mode, but the trimmers aren't doing their job. You know, they've still got the sails deep as can be. You tell them, or are they at that level they don't need to be told? They just set up the rig for the mode.
Yeah, I mean, every tactician's different, because the tactician's the boss of the boat when you're sailing. I mean, obviously the owner-driver, but the owner-driver will do whatever the tactician sort of says. I like to trust in the people I have around me, even if it's people I haven't really sailed with. I like to always, I try not to micromanage. And so I like to sort of say, hey guys, we need to go a lower, faster mode here, like, help us out. And then I trust their process of going down and adjusting the sails. Sometimes I look at it and go, I don't agree with this, but I at least wait to see how it works. But I really believe in sort of not micromanaging and empowering those people. I sit there and go, okay, look, I wouldn't set up the sail like that if I wanted a low mode, but this guy trims jibs for the last 15 years, full-time professional job. All he does is trim the jib, like on every single boat he goes to, whatever it is. And I go, I like to believe he can do a better job than I can. So if it's not working, I call for a low mode, and there's other boats doing a way better job than us. I will look around the boat and try to problem solve it. Okay, maybe it's, okay, how's your helm? Okay, you're too loaded in the helm. Copy. Okay, well, let's go traveller down, or a bit more main sheet ease to unload the rudder. What is it? And try to problem solve. But as a general thing, I usually just go, hey, I just call the mode, and sometimes I'll call the number. So if our target in these boats upwind in 12 knots is 9.1 knots, our fast mode would be 9.5, our high mode would be 8.5, something like that. And so I'll give them a number for them to work towards, so they know how much of a low mode I'm talking. Am I talking like 1 degree and 0.2 of a knot, or am I talking, I want to go a knot faster and 10 degrees lower? I'll give them the range, and then it's their job to set the boat up that way and get the maximum performance.
There's a lot of trust in the tactician too, I suppose, because, you know, a couple of weeks ago they might have had a different tactician who had a different view about moding, and you might want to go lower and faster than the previous tactician, so it would throw the team out. And leading to that, how does the communication loop work between all the people on board? Is it you're the voice, I suppose, and they've just got to fit in? Because sometimes you have guys saying, well, no, that's not right, or are they more professional than that? They just show trust in you?
Yeah, in general, once you get to this level, it's a very professional unit, and there's a hierarchy on board, and there's you stay in your lane. But for sure, there's times there where people don't trust you and think that you're not a good tactician, or you're not doing a good job and all that. But I think everyone's quite professional, and they voice it at the right times. Like you do a debrief after each event, and the person running the boat might say, hey, what are your thoughts? Where are we weak? Where are we strong? And you might say, look, and the trimmer might say, for sure there's a lot of job security where a lot of these guys will never say, I'm doing a bad job. They'll just pass the ball on. I think it's the bow team that needs to work, or the tactician. he missed every shift. How are we supposed to do well when we're missing all the shifts? There is a little bit of that at the right time, but on the boat at the time, it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare to have, at that level, to have arguments between crew members. You come to a twilight race and you'll see 10 times more arguments than you do in one of these, because basically those guys who second guessing you, who are questioning things, who argue with different people, just don't get offered a job on these boats, because there's so many amazing sailors out there that they'll just get replaced.
I was listening to a podcast some time ago, and there was a guy talking. He says he knows you well, but maybe he doesn't. We'll find out in a minute. Morgan Trubovich.
Yeah, Truby. Yep.
Yeah, Truby.
Know him well.
And he was talking about processes before results. And I thought, because in our sailing, it's all very results orientated. Where did you come today? And where do you hope to finish today? And all that kind of stuff. And I think, what a lot of rubbish, really, isn't it? It's all about getting your processes right, then the results will come. That's what he talks about. He says the boat doesn't know ambition, You got to drive the processes, and then, ambition will come to you.
Mm-hmm.
So he also told the story about you with the China Olympics, if I can bring that up.
Yeah.
He said you were very result driven, and then you switched your mindset to processes for London.
Yep.
Talk to us about that.
Truby's he's a trimmer on this boat, Phoenix actually, the jib trimmer. Funny, you have an upwind trimmer and a downwind trimmer as well. So he's the upwind trimmer on the jibs, and then you've got a downwind trimmer on the spinnakers, because these guys are so specialist in their area that they just, you divide the jobs up so much. 2008 for sure. Very result driven. Everyone knows, a lot of people know that I was the favourite going into that, and choked at those Olympics and finished 22nd. I think, what Truby's talking about is my process driven. Mick Fanning's probably my favourite Aussie sports icon, probably my favourite sportsman ever. And back then he came out with a book called White Lightning, and I was just a mega fan of Mick Fanning, always have been. And he had this saying in it, and it was, sometimes when a man embarks on a mission, he can become impossible to stop. And again, one of those things that just resonated with me. And what that did for me was, I started focusing on that, and I started saying to myself, because I'd proven it before, if I do what I know I can, no one's going to stop me. And so I started using, I'm going to become impossible to stop, and if I do what I know I can, no one's going to beat me, and these sort of mantras. And what that did for me was it took the result out of my competitors' hands and put it in my hands. And I stopped thinking of who I'm competing, Paul Goodison, he's good in light airs, Rasmus Meergren's fast downwind, or Robert Scheidt's good in these conditions, or whatever it was. I just started going, if I sail to my ability, it doesn't matter what my competitors do, they won't beat me. And it became like almost a fun thing for me as well, where I used to literally going upwind say to myself, this guy actually thinks he's going to match me here. Like, I'm going to absolutely smoke you. And the harder it got, the windier it got, I used to look there and just smile at this guy in pain and going, you actually think that you're going to go through more pain than I'm willing to go through? And I was a bit sick and twisted in the head. And I used to just say, but what that did for me was it made me really concentrate on the process, because my result isn't in the hand of my competitors, because it's very easy to think, if he has a good day, he's going to do this and that. But I started just saying, if I do what I know I can, there's nothing you guys are going to do to stop me from winning. So I just started focusing on myself, and I stopped looking at the person next to me in the boat. I started just going, that's just another boat. I don't care who you are. You can be ranked 50th in the world. You can be ranked number 2 in the world. It doesn't matter, because I'm ranked number 1 in the world, and you're not going to, if I do my thing, I'm going to leave you in my dust. And I think that's what Truby's sort of talking about, is I just I brought all the focus on myself and took it out of the hands of that's the way I looked at it, is the result wasn't in the hands of my competitors, it's just in my hands. And if I go out and deliver what I know I can and concentrate on the process and do sail to the best of my ability, I'm walking home with a gold medal. And I truly believe that. And even after, as I rocked up to the Olympics, I was a favourite, as I was in China, and all the press is saying, oh, are you going to choke again? Demons, like what's going to happen? My competitors are saying that too. And like the thing that made me block that out, and I mean, I used to have nightmares about going out there and choking again, but the thing that made me block that out is it's out of your hands. It's not in your hands. It's in my hands. And I know if I do what I know I can, it's a foregone conclusion. And it takes a lot. It's one thing saying those things, but it's another thing actually buying into it. And I remember I said it a lot before I actually believed it, but then all of a sudden I start getting good results, and I just go, okay, this is my mantra moving forward. And as Mick Fanning says, once I embark on this mission, I'm going to be impossible to stop. And I truly believed if I sailed to my abilities, it was over.
Right. Well, Truby's gone on to make a living out of coaching and teaching this kind of stuff. That's the impression I got. Mm-hmm. Anyway, debriefs. You've lived through a lot of debriefs. We have debriefs too. We drive home angry or something, and that's kind of a debrief, isn't it? Or lose sleep or whatever. We're sort of debriefing, but even though it might not be very constructive. Some debriefs work well, some don't. What's the sign of a good debrief?
For sure, it's different with a team and then with an individual. But I guess the underlying thing is leave egos at the door and be just totally candid. It's easy to let emotion come into it. When I was sailing my laser, I was the opposite. I was the opposite of someone who swept things under the rug. I was hypercritical of everything, and I would sit there and say, oh, I'm not fast enough downwind, and my coach would go, well, you overtook 7 boats on that run and 6 boats on the other run. Like, why? I go, because I can still be so much better than that. Like, I can overtake 8 boats and 9 boats, and that was always me in my laser, is nothing's ever good enough. I could win the race by a minute 20, and I'd be like, yeah, but if I didn't miss that top mark approach, I would have won by a minute 40. And that's just, there's actually a story of me when I was 16 years old at Gosford Sailing Club, and I won this club championship race by 7 minutes, but I was out there and I was next to an Etchell, and I tacked over and didn't do a good tack and wobbled and got going, and then this guy in an Etchell just goes, he came up to me after the race and goes, why were you swearing and punching the boat when you, because I missed the tack? He goes, but you won the race by 7 minutes. I'm like, yeah, but I would have won by 7 minutes 10 if I didn't mess that up. And he just looked at me like I was from another planet, and he's like, there's something wrong with this kid. But that's just the mentality I had all the time, is like, no matter how, we're in a sport that it's impossible to be perfect. It's not like 10-pin bowling where you can bowl 300 and that's perfection. There's no such thing as perfection in our sport. So you just got to constantly strive to be better all times. And so I think I would say with laser sailing, is being candid with myself. What are actually my issues, and just being honest with yourself. Like, it's easy to just go, oh, I lost boats there, but he just got more wind than me, but it's a matter of, did he actually get more wind than you, or does he have better technique? Or did he read the wind better? You're actually fast, but he reads the wind better than you, and he keeps beating you downwind because he's picking it better. So it's just being honest with yourself. And then within a team environment, for me, it's just that leaving your egos at the door and that complete honesty. And any team, because I obviously manage the SailGP team for Australia, and I just say, look, there's no one's getting fired here. No matter what you say, I have full trust in you guys that you're the absolute best in the world. I trust Goobs as our wing trimmer. I think you're the best in the world. I think Jason Waterhouse is the best flight controller. I think Sam Newton trims a jib better than anyone. I think Tash Bryant's the best strategist in the world. I genuinely believe that. So nothing you do is going to change my opinion of that. But we need to just be honest with each other and be candid and put your hand up if we make a mistake and say, like, something happened and we did a late jibe and got rocked up and fell into the water, and we go back and watch it and we go, it's easy to go, oh, Jason, why didn't you fly the boat? But he goes, well, usually I go off the 3, 2, 1 lock call for the board hitting the lock. I heard 3, 2, and then I didn't hit. And Tom, you're supposed to say 3, 2, 1 lock, but you didn't say that, and that put my timing out. And so it actually comes back to why did I not say it? Oh, well, I had to turn because of another boat or something like that. I was watching the wrong way. Yeah, but you went off your process, and that has a follow-on effect for the rest of us. And so I have to actually go, okay, that was my mistake. I missed a word in the comms, which is an important link in the whole communication. And it's just that ability to put your hand up and say, yep, I messed up and I'll get better next time and I'll be better tomorrow because of it. And I think that's the best way I can sort of explain debriefing. It's just open, honest, candid discussions, whether it's with yourself, sailing solo, or whether it's in a team.
The next thing I want to talk about was motivation. We're weekend hacks. Our motivation goes up and down. Or, people say, oh, I've been doing too much sailing lately. I've been sailing twice a week or something. You've been a pro sailor for some 25 years now. How do you manage motivation? You must get tired sometimes or get over it or want to do something completely different.
Yeah, no, motivation is tough at times, and when a few people know this story, but when I decided I wanted to be a pro sailor, it was at the Sydney Olympics. I was sitting on Bradley's Head watching the lasers sail. I was a tennis player at this point, and my whole focus was to be a tennis player, but I'd started falling out of love with tennis, and then I came to the Olympics and I used to catch a train down. Back then, I think for the Olympics, they gave us time off school. I think we got a 2-week holiday, so I'd catch the train from Gosford to St Leonard's, get on a bus out to Mossman, and then walk down to the headland pretty much every day of my school holidays. And I was there to cheer on Michael Blackburn to try to beat Robert Scheidt and Ben Ainsley. But after that day, where I remember Michael got the bronze medal, and I was finished that day and I was on a high sort of watching it all, the match race between Scheidt and Ainsley, and I went back and jumped on the train, started an hour-and-a-half trip home, and I had a backpack and I had a piece of paper and I wrote down my goals for my career in that, and it started at win the Laser Club Championship that year, Coast Championships, Metros, and then States, Nationals, Worlds, and then the top 3 were Olympics, World Sailor of the Year, and the America's Cup. And back then I was so easily motivated with this list, and every time I'd do it, like the joy, the sort of self-satisfaction it brought me, just coming up and crossing one off the list was like a real big thing for me. And I went through, I had that list for a long time actually, but I ended up crossing the Moth by sort of 2013 when we won the America's Cup. And then I'd never not had a goal since 2000. For 13 years, I always had something I was striving for next. And it was a bit of a transition period for me, and like, what do I do next? Because I was always so goal orientated. I haven't written another list since, and I sort of just go, okay, I'm just going to go with the flow a bit. And then SailGP came along, and I said, okay, I want to win SailGP, and we were able to do that. And then what do you want to do next? And I don't have anything specific, but I know there's something inside me, but it's kind of a lifelong thing, is I just want to represent Australia and make Australia known as the best sailing nation in the world. And for me, the way of doing that is the most visualised one now is through winning SailGP. But that also extends into once I retire. I'm the CEO of the team, I'm a part owner of the team. I want to, for the next 20 years, I'd love to be guiding in the next generation of Aussie talent and helping mentor them and bring them on to try to keep Australia at the top of the level. And I remember I read a book called Legacy. It's by Graham Henry. It's about the All Blacks, and it talks about like you don't own the jersey, you're just holding it for the next guy, and your job is to leave it in a better position than when you got it. And I think that's a great way of thinking of it, and that's a way I think of me and SailGP, because I think SailGP is going to be around for a long time, and I want to do the best I can, represent Australia as well as I can, leave us, and then when I'm done, hand it on to the next guy, leave it in a position where he's got a great platform to go on from where I went on. And I want to, if I could be there in 20, 30 years, I'd be very happy sort of mentoring the next sort of generation, trying to keep Australia at the top. But yeah, I think to go back to how do you stay motivated, it's just, for me, I find it so easy to get motivated with whatever it is. I mean, I'm representing our country in the biggest sailing competition in the world, and like I've got to do that with sort of respect, dignity, and I want to make people proud to say, oh yeah, I'm an Aussie, and they say, oh, the Aussies are really good they win the SailGP or whatever it is if you talk in sailing circles, and be proud to sort of say that. So it's, no matter what it is, I find it very easy, and I'm in a fortunate position where I get to race these amazing things and lead a team for my country, so it's not hard for me to get motivated.
What about in terms of motivation and application? What about the America's Cup? Can you see another one for you? And given you've got a young family now,
yeah,
2 young kids.
Yeah, I've got a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old. So there's plenty happening at home. The America's Cup, I'll always love it, and yeah, I might do it. I've been talking to teams. I've said no to teams. I've shown interest in other ones. At the moment, I actually couldn't tell you right now whether I'll be in the next America's Cup. For me right now, I'm not the young, when I got into the Cup, I think I was 25 years old or something like that. I'm not that young guy who would have taken any offer and jumped at it and train all day, all night for it. I've got a family now, and I've been there and I've done it. And so, yeah, it basically now the deal's got to be worth my while, but people think of that as in a monetary thing. I just said no. I won't tell who, but I just said no to a biggest amount of money I've ever been offered in my life. I just said no to from a team for this Cup because it didn't fit in with my family. I would have had to spend a lot of time away from the family. Even if they relocated to Europe, the way it worked with the schedule and with SailGP, they could relocate, but I was still going to be away a lot of the time. So I said no to that because it just didn't work with the family mix. But I am confident I could make that work with a certain team, and I'm talking to a team now, and yeah, I'm hopeful it'll happen again. But as I said, if I don't do it again, that's fine. But I would like to do it again.
We're impressed that you're so loyal to the Australian team. A lot of your Lake Macquarie mates, they're swapping teams like you wouldn't believe. I've got a list here. We've got, and they're all on the western side of Lake Macquarie, the best part. Outridge, he's an Aussie gold medalist, then he was Japanese, then he reckons he's a Kiwi, now he's part Sweden. He says he's a Kiwi when he's driving a cup boat. Good grief. Gooby, your other mate. He's an Aussie gold medalist as well. Then he's a Brit. Now he wants to sail with you as an Aussie.
Does.
Langford, he was an Aussie. Now he says he's Italian. It goes on and on. Will Ryan.
Yeah.
He's up the road from you. Another Aussie gold medalist. 1 minute he's an Aussie, then he's Swiss. Now he reckons he's an Italian. Parko, he's an Aussie. Sails with Ainsley. Pretends he's a Brit. What if someone like Greg Norman, I think, did we show a photo of him before? From,
Yeah.
I don't know what that imposter's doing here, trying to befriend you. I reckon there's something going on. So he was running Live Golf.
Yeah.
There's a rumour going around that they're going to launch Live Sail. Live
Oh,
Sail. Yeah. So he's been reaching out to you, I believe. You're not answering the phone. You're not picking up, Tom. You've been in New Zealand holidaying. Apparently, Cameron Smith, they paid him 150 million sign-on fee. Don't worry about the results. Cam's never had any results after that. But he's happy with his 150 million. If Greggy said to you, there's 150 million for you, Tom, don't worry about the results. Look after your family. Your little boys could have moths like you wouldn't believe. Would you take it or leave it?
Yeah, I'll be Saudi Arabian tomorrow. But
You are honest.
it's a tough one. Even the live debate and in professional sailing and there's a lot of it's a tough one. And I think as you get older and stuff, whether you're it's different for every person. Do you feel like you've got enough money to retire on and be happy, or do you need more? And if you don't, maybe you do take the money. If you don't, if you've got plenty of money and you go, I've got enough money, and then you're probably doing it for the passion more, and so you're very hard to tempt over. But yeah, I mean, a lot of teams have asked me to switch. In SailGP, it's a 50% nationality rule, and so it's you can change around, and I've had offers to switch it up. But no, I'm very passionate to stay with the Aussies as long as I can, and as I said, I've got a 30-year plan with the team, so it's going to have to be a big offer to change my 30-year plan.
Maybe 200 million.
Yeah, done.
We might wrap it up there. We've been going a while. We are really indebted, Tom. It's a big moment for our little club to have you here. You probably don't feel that or recognise that, but it is. The guys have been saying to me for years we should get Tom back, and as I said before, they quote you sometimes, 1 foot for every wave, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. We hope we can have you back in 6 years' time or shorter.
Let's lock it in.
Lock it in. Remember that?
The kids will be sailing here, Marty.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. They're going to be good. They're going to hike hard and no pain, 1 foot per wave.
We've just got a small token to hand to you in appreciation. It's I got a tip off 6 years ago about your drinking habits.
Oh.
It may have changed, I don't know, but we've gone down that path again.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
It's the good rum.
We got. Oh yeah. Oh, very nice. Cracking rum. No, thank you. My drinking habits have changed quite a lot, but when I have friends over, theirs haven't seemed to change much. So that'll be perfect, and I'll definitely join them. So thank you very much for that, and thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it, and thank you.